Hello, welcome again to Sports Unlocked, going through all the week's sports news with Martyn Ziegler from The Times, Tariq Panja from The New York Times, and myself, Rob Harris from Sky News, and our growing band of listeners.
We seem to be having increased amount of feedback. What's the latest one we've got?
We've had from Eric Barnes on Blue Sky, where we can be found at sportunlocked.bsky.social. He says, the dry humour between you three is quite good. I like the podcasts that I take in to be informative and fun at the same time, which yours is.
Nice one, Eric. Checks in the post. Same again next week, please, pal.
And via email, sportunlockpod@gmail.com. Tim Walters has a question, which we can get to later, about the World Cup and climate issues in 2026. He says, I have boundless appetite for a tone of world-weary cynicism towards the business of sport. So keep up the great work in that regard.
I will try and be as world-weary as possible.
Well, you've been travelling the world this week, both of you out in Serbia, in Belgrade, for the UEFA Congress. How was it out there?
It was an interesting place. It seems to be a country where they've allied themselves to Russia rather than the European Union, and as a result, it does feel a bit sort of post-Soviet vibe.
Yeah, my striking feeling was cigarette smoke was the... It's in the European Union everywhere. Indoor smoking in public places is not allowed, and God, in Serbia, you kind of see that everywhere. But where the Congress itself was a place of historic significance, wasn't it?
It used to be called the Hotel Intercontinental. You know, it's meant to be the smartest hotel in Belgrade. And there's not a huge amount of very smart hotels, but
not up to your high standards.
No, exactly.
You might get some complaints from Serbians then. You're sort of questioning the quality of hotels in Belgrade.
No, I'm not a big fan of these big glitzy hotels at all. I think I'm much more of a modest hotel fan myself. But yeah, this hotel used to be called the Intercontinental, and it's where the infamous, notorious Serbian warlord Arkan, war criminal during the Yugoslavian Civil War, met his grisly end, died in a hail of gunfire in the lobby where many UEFA delegates were enjoying a nice sit down on a comfy sofa.
Well, there was an election there, and maybe a grisly end, not so grisly for some of the candidates we'll get into. But other famous guests at this place, there's a mural or a collection of photos. Robert Mugabe, former Zimbabwean leader, we talked about him a little bit last week. For movie fans of a certain type, Steven Seagal are also there next to Bob Mugabe, as well as James Brown.
Quite a mix of people. And you were able to get out and about in Belgrade as well.
There were some nice streets in the historic centre there, cobbled streets there with some nice restaurants. We had a lovely meal one night with musical accompaniment.
When you came to the Panja, I didn't know what was happening. And what was the first press conference?
There's a lot of graffiti around about Kosovo. There was a sort of war of separation in 1999. Kosovo sort of broke away from Serbia, and that continues to be an issue. I noticed near the airport, there's a Kosovo is Serbia in English across a motorway bridge. And actually, interestingly, all the flags of the 55 UEFA nations were there for the Congress. But the Kosovo one was there initially, and then it disappeared. It's quite embarrassing, I think, for the Serbian hosts, but someone had taken it away. And, everyone had a flag apart from Kosovo.
Well, the UEFA Disciplinary Committee might have been there as well. So we've seen fines levied for these discriminatory chants. Do you think UEFA's disciplinary panel will open a case against its own Congress?
The question of what just happened to the flag. Where is it in Belgrade?
Yes, true. It's going to appear in various posts in different places.
Yeah, maybe they should have gone for virtual flags on screens. That might have been less problematic. But you mentioned Russia there, and perhaps by this Congress we've expected some more conversations about Russia's return to football from UEFA potentially, but those peace talks, the pace has slowed down, certainly with now Donald Trump getting more critical of Vladimir Putin in the last week over his dealings with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. But then the person who made all the news at the UEFA Congress, Gianni Infantino, their FIFA president, did bring up Russia, building on some of the themes he talked to us about the other week in Northern Ireland about opening the door to Russia's return. I
think it's fairly clear that both Infantino and then the UEFA president Alexander Shevrin in his press conference afterwards had to sort of accept that there's going to be no change until there's peace in Ukraine, until there is a peace deal.
When the war stops, they will be readmitted. The first decision was done together with FIFA, and as much as we discuss with FIFA, I think we will do it. We'll do it together when we do it.
And to be honest, everyone probably wants peace, and people don't want countries kicked out all the time either. So that kind of made sense. But the Russian FA president, who also heads up Gazprom, Zhukov, he was there as well, and people tried to have a word with him, and he was no commenting across those 2 days. And it just shows how complex it is, because Gazprom has been providing some of the troops for Russia's war effort in Ukraine as well. So that's how tangled everything has got there.
Gazprom, of course, a sanctioned entity in many countries, including the United Kingdom and the United States. Well, Gianni Infantino had some news to deliver about the United States and the United Kingdom in his speech, so unexpectedly, making news about the Women's World Cup hosting.
Yeah, a bit of ambush marketing, do you think? Using UEFA's big moment to make a FIFA announcement about two very important World Cups.
But it was very helpful from Infantino for any journalists there, giving some actual news.
Yeah, not complaining about that, but interesting. I think it must have caught everyone by surprise.
Do you think it might have been rushed out because of the confusion around a potential bid for the 2035 World Cup that might have challenged the UK?
I don't think it was rushed out. I mean, because it was delayed. So when the expressions of interest were 5 p.m. Central European time on Monday for both the 2031-2035 World Cup. When at the similar point for the men's World Cups of 2030 and 2034, the bids were confirmed within 14 minutes of that deadline expiring.
Yeah, but you said it taken them by surprise. So what do you mean there then? If it wasn't rushed out, but has also taken people by surprise?
Taken because I think they thought that it was going to in the usual way there would be a communication. And done via a press release, and I don't think they were warned that his staff were warned that Gianni Infantino was going to make this announcement. Is what I mean.
Quite effective communication in a way, saying it on camera, which spreads the message more rather than being one of these very dry press releases. So it definitely got more news because you actually heard someone announcing it on camera.
Yeah, and for your people like you working TV, it's like a dream, isn't it, Rob? Because then you can actually get pictures and audio of the FIFA president doing it live. So that's it's definitely good from that point of view. I think what the confusion Tariq refers to is that Spain, Portugal, and Morocco were also mentioned of these expressions of interest, but completely differently. So. From what I understand, Spain put it in a statement to FIFA saying that they were wanted to bid with Portugal and Morocco. Portugal put in a separate one saying that they wanted to bid with Spain alone, and Morocco didn't put in anything at all. So it appears there's been no confirmation, but it appears that has been declared invalid because Gianni Infantino, as we heard, referred to the only valid bid for 2035 coming from the UK.
Some word around questioning if there'd be more scepticism about the process if it involved a country like Saudi Arabia, where it's the UK who are beneficiaries. But we did point out the other week how it almost did follow the similar insider knowledge. The fact the FA a month ago were able to rush out government support from Sir Keir Starmer within moments of the FIFA press release landing, confirming this fast-track process for 2031 and 2035.
I'm sure the Saudi journalists and media out there reporting on this in the same way, figuring out how FIFA managed to do this. Also, they announced the World Cups, those World Cups, 31 in the USA and possibly the Caribbean. And this one in 35 will be the expanded 48-team Women's World Cup as well. So these will be big tournaments.
They sure will. I do think it's a bit shame that we're not actually, yet again, we're not having any bidding competition. It does seem like what's happening is the powers that be are sort of organising things so that they can get the winning bid that they want without having to have a competition.
How much is that you missing potentially months, years of reporting on a heated contest? You reported on England's 2006 Men's World Cup bid, as well as we reported on the 2018 World Cup bid. Those stories went on for months, all the political shenanigans, the trips around the world by the bid teams, the chase for votes, the gifts.
Yeah, you might have a point, Rob. You might have a point there. A bit of personal self-interest. I do actually think that the 2031 Women's World Cup could be fascinating because there is an intention that it's going to be shared, mainly in the USA, but be shared with some Caribbean countries. Jamaica's been mentioned, for example. And I think that could be really, really a good development.
I pointed out to Zieg as well while we were there in the meeting in the room when this was announced, in the minutes after. It's a really big deal to get a World Cup in your country, and this is a big 48-team World Cup. I just thought the coverage was a bit flat. It wasn't really celebrated enormously. You just imagine if England and Ireland and Scotland, Wales, etc., were given the Men's World Cup. It would be a huge day of announcements and celebration. Didn't really see much of that yesterday. Why would that be?
Well, it didn't have a moment of drama, and as we were just talking about, when these contests went on for months in the Men's World Cup bidding world, when they were contested, it would all reach a big climax. The world is watching, the jeopardy, who might win, a big ceremony, and that creates a made-for-live TV moment around the world, which also helps to generate interest by announcing it on stage at a UEFA event on a Thursday morning. Just dropped out there with no subsequent sort of wider coverage, even from any of the prospective hosts as well, apart from effectively social media posts. It doesn't create a moment.
And it wasn't necessarily they've been awarded the World Cup, wasn't it? The language was, we have one valid bid for this World Cup in 31 and one valid bid for this World Cup in 35. So then there's going to be an announcement. But you're right. Maybe the lack of drama means lack of big bang moment.
And obviously, still the inspections of the stadiums and the human rights assessments of the host countries before FIFA can ratify the host of the 2031 and 2035 World Cups. And it does seem at this stage that the Women's World Cup does benefit going to those markets with more established domestic football crowds in the women's game. If you do go to a market where the domestic clubs aren't quite bringing in the crowds yet, it will be a struggle for the tournaments, even if you do get the influx of visiting fans. So in many ways, a Women's World Cup is more beneficial to the UK than a Men's World Cup. We see big men's crowds, particularly in England and in Scotland already, whereas the development of the Women's Super League can only be boosted by having a Women's World Cup to grow the fan base even more, and also in the United States as well, whereas we heard in last week's pod, they're averaging 19,000 at Angel City. So just imagine what the Women's World Cup can do there after the LA Olympics.
We'll get a test of your theory soon anyway, won't we, with the next World Cup being in Brazil, where women's club football exists but isn't discussed in the same way as it perhaps is in Europe.
But what a waste. I barely heard a word from them. I don't think they've had any promotion. They're 2 years away from it, and Brazil isn't seizing the moment. I don't know if it's different domestically, but internationally, they haven't started any of that messaging to encourage fans to go, to get people focused on Brazilian domestic women's football. It's hard enough for domestic men's football in Brazil to get a global spotlight. So for the women's game, you expect they need to start getting a go on all this. Yes, qualifying hasn't begun yet, which would be a natural sort of starting point. But near silence from them.
Near silence from them, but a bit more language from Gianni Infantino concerning women's football. The Olympic competition, he said that the women's Olympic football competition will be increased to 16 teams from 12, while the men's one, I think he said, will be reduced from 16 to 12 because in terms of the men's, he said it's just effectively an under-23 event, whereas for women's football, it's a banner competition in their calendar.
He did say that still has to be approved by the IOC. It's an interesting one for them. I presume they will go for it, but it's. I think it wouldn't have happened 10 years ago, but I think now things have changed.
It was something that I covered during the Paris Olympics. One day when the IOC had their gender equality press conference, I asked why football doesn't have gender equality, and then the IOC said raising the number of women's teams would potentially trigger requests from other team sports, which would then have an even greater impact on the cost, complexity, size, and sustainability of the games. But to actually flip it, so the women's competition is bigger, certainly makes more sense for the LA Games in 2028.
Yeah, exactly. So you're keeping the same footprint there.
So that was all the news from Gianni Infantino. But some of the main business for the Congress was elections. Who sits on the UEFA Executive Committee? Who, in theory, takes the decisions that influence all the competitions like the Champions League and the Euros? And quite a bit of politics, quite a bit of shenanigans in terms of bust-ups.
Yeah. So these were seats on the UEFA Executive Committee, 2-year and 4-year ones. And there's two big bust-ups and one, I guess, big piece of news that we knew about. First, the good news, if you want, or a positive story. Lisa Klaveness, the Norwegian FA president, who has been on this pod, has been quite outspoken on issues regarding human rights in Qatar and other issues in football, has been added to the UEFA Executive Committee. She was the only person in for this one extra female seat there at UEFA, joining another pod regular, Laura McAllister from Wales.
It was quite interesting to note how the UEFA press release said that Klaveness was elected by acclamation after she'd raised issues with FIFA's vote on the 2034 World Cup, and that being confirmed for Saudi Arabia by acclamation last year.
Well, there you go. You know what's interesting is you say that. Well, now she's in the board. Will she be as outspoken as she has been in the past? So that's something to keep an eye on. And will she have that voice heard in there? So that's something to look for. But the big arguments concern the elections of Pedro Proença, or the non-election of Pedro Proença, the new Portuguese FA president, and Andrei Shevchenko, who needs no explanation because great former football player, Ukrainian FA president, now managed Ukraine, great striker at AC Milan, Dinamo Kiev, also played for Chelsea.
Yeah, so he would have been only the second former player to actually go on to the men's player to go on to the Exco, because Lisa Klaveness, she played as well. In fact, I suppose Laura McAllister did too, so we should remember that. But he actually only got 15 votes and he didn't get in, which was, I think it was a big shame. I think it would have been very good if he'd been on for very many reasons. But probably his sort of history, he was friends with Zvonimir Boban, who fell out badly with the UEFA president Alexander Shefrin just over a year ago, and that doesn't help. And actually at the Paris Congress a year ago, he abstained instead of supporting statute changes which would allow Shefrin to stand again in 2027.
Yeah, and I guess, standing up and showing that yellow card as he did in Paris might have cost him there. The Portuguese spat is even more different, but kind of incredible in its own way, where the new Portuguese FA president wrote to UEFA to say that Fernando Gomes had officially resigned from his position as a member of the FIFA Council following his move to the Portuguese Olympic Committee. Well, that was news to Fernando Gomes, who hoped to sit on one more FIFA Council meeting at the Congress in Paraguay where he wanted to say goodbye. So then he wrote a letter to all the delegates ahead of this election, where he absolutely lambasted Pedro Proença. He said he's chosen a path of destroying the legacy that my team and I have built over 13 years through decisions and public insinuations aimed at attacking our good name, and which will be shown are completely unfounded. Well, it might have struck a chord. Proença ended up with just 7 votes and did not make the FIFA Exco.
I'm pretty sure that's a record low number of votes.
It might be. Shows how powerful and popular, I guess, Fernando Gomez was. Very, very close to Alexander Schäferin, the UEFA president. Particularly gave a big speech about Fernando Gomez in Paris. And there was some words from Schäferin to the press. We had a press conference, did we, at the end of the Congress as well, didn't we?
It didn't last very long, did it? Was it only about 10 minutes?
Yeah, about blink and you'll miss it. About 10 minutes.
But you missed it, didn't you? You'd left by then.
Yes, I had to catch 2 flights to get back to the UK. But it was Martyn was there holding the fort. Martyn, you got a question in there, as did a few others we could come into. What did you ask?
I asked about just what Schäferin thought about this idea, which we talked about previously, about a 64-team World Cup as a one-off for 2030. He said they thought it was a very bad idea.
I mean, this proposal was maybe even more surprising for me than for you. I think it's a bad idea. I think it's not a good idea for the World Cup itself, and it's not a good idea for our qualifiers as well, as you know. So I'm not supporting that idea. I don't know where it came from. It's strange that we didn't know anything before this proposal at the FIFA Council.
Jamie Gardner from the Press Association did ask him about whether he was going to run again in 2027, having said that he wouldn't in Paris, and he declined to answer the question, which was interesting.
Said it wasn't the day for it.
It was exactly the day for it, because we don't get that many chances of asking questions in a press conference. One would argue. I mean, there's reasons why he would want to stay. He got a 13% pay rise in the last year. That might be one of them. His salary is now up to 3.8 million, if you want in dollars, because he got a 375,000 Swiss franc pay rise in the last year.
So Schäferin on just over $4 million compared to Gianni Infantino just under $4.8 million. How do they compare across the world of sport? A lot more than Premier League CEO, for instance, but a lot less than American sports commissioners.
Yeah, the American market, I guess, is American pay generally is the highest in the world across the board. American media, American sports executives, American TV as well, much bigger. And I guess it depends on the role. These are political roles rather than these are elected roles compared to those. But yeah, good luck to those in the seats.
Well, that's a lot on the UEFA Congress, but it's also all been about money this week in the Premier League and some unusual protests coming up Manchester City, of all places. We've never really heard the fans expressing anger against the ownership of Sheikh Mansour since the takeover in 2008. But the way tickets are being sold or resold has really caused a lot of irritation. They protest for the opening minutes of the match against Leicester in midweek. They boycotted it. They stayed inside the stands, didn't go out into their seats.
Yeah, this seems to be a wider movement among fans across clubs as well, isn't there? Over ticket prices and moving fans from their seats in order to put higher priced tickets for sale. We've seen 600 fans behind the dugout at Manchester United also being told that they need to move in order to sell luxury packages to supporters. So this is something that's worth watching. It feels like a movement is building.
Yeah, I know from the side of, say, Viagogo, maybe a sense that they feel harshly blamed, and a lot of the communication that City has been left to Pep Guardiola, who couldn't criticise his own fans. So wasn't exactly unsympathetic to the protest. But perhaps some of the issues lost in translation if it is just corporate seats that are being resold rather than those normal fan seats?
There is definitely a big movement generally in the Premier League around ticket prices, because just about all the clubs are raising ticket prices, and people are bringing in more expensive seats generally to try and increase their revenue. So if you look at the Football Supporters Association, it's something they are very hot on.
And Manchester City fans making light of it with their chants. Normally they get irritated by those empty ad comments or empty seats, but this was a day when they welcomed them. But we've never really heard the City fans promoting Abu Dhabi in the way that Newcastle fans are now pushing holidays to Saudi Arabia.
This is incredible, isn't it? I mean, if you looked on social media, X or TikTok, these fans basically just doing a tourist advert. Clearly, I think they've confirmed they've been paid. Saying, "Oh, let's not celebrate in the big market. Let's go and celebrate in Riyadh." And it's, I suppose it's one way of the Saudis using their connection with Newcastle to try and drum up some visitor business. But if you look at the comments, it didn't go down very well at all.
This is the biggest weekend of my life. Over 150,000 Newcastle United fans will be on the field at Town Moor as Newcastle United will celebrate the Carabao Cup, which we won against Liverpool. 1955 was our last domestic major honour. We are talking 70 years in the making. We have waited so long, but now we will enjoy every second of it. Now, of course, since our takeover in 2021, the Public Investment Fund over in Saudi Arabia has invested heavily in our football club, and we are seeing a huge transformation on and off the pitch. But it doesn't stop there. For those of you watching who want to continue on the after party, get yourselves over to Saudi Arabia, enjoy the culture, learn a lot more about the country, and of course, get yourselves over to the Boulevard Road in Riyadh. I've had the chance myself to be there in 2022, and for you, it's a chance as well to learn a lot more about the background of Newcastle United, and of course, it is easy to get to. There are plenty of direct flight options in the UK. Visas are available online, and you can also get them on arrival to Saudi Arabia if you are from the United Kingdom. As for travel packages, I will have the link to visit Saudi in my bio. These deals will expire on the 30th of March, so make sure you are quick over the next couple of days. Go on, have a look for yourselves, see if there is something you would like to do in Saudi Arabia, and book yourselves on, enjoy it, make the most out of it, and continue to enjoy supporting Newcastle United. It is the first trophy of many, and make a holiday out of it, make an after party out of it, and just learn about the culture of Saudi Arabia and enjoy it. You will love it.
That's the Magpies influencer, Adam Pearson. And yes, we've just amplified the tourism message too. So maybe some people have picked up some travel advice for going there. And Pearson was pretty open himself about why he accepted this deal. He did later say Newcastle United are in Europe next season and are likely in Asia this summer for pre-season. Those trips have now been paid off for me. I don't like it any more than you, but that was why I did it. And this is reflective of a new type of fan media where they've got their own audience on platforms like YouTube that he posts normally just about the team.
It's worth watching just to show how quickly at least this brand of influencer is happy to go down this road, and it goes back into the ownership being owned by Saudi Arabia, much discussed, and what it means. And I guess, how do you commercialize that? In some cases, it is selling these trips and these gifts. And there was a guy offering the Saudi headwear as well, I think, to fans outside Wembley Stadium in one of the videos. It is quite interesting. And of course, the takeover is nothing to do with the Saudi state. That's what the Premier League has been told. Isn't that right, guys?
Yeah, think about these messages. They're so inauthentic from the fans. I mean, they couldn't actually be promoting Saudi Arabia, even filmed in Saudi, or not sounding like you're reading off a script. It's perfectly valid for Saudi Arabia to grow as a tourist destination and to, for influencers to promote places. It was just the messaging sounded like it was reading off a sheet.
Well, presumably they were reading off a sheet someone had produced, and the visa discounts and all the rest of it. I mean, look, it just reminded me how quickly the talking points about Saudi Arabia were on social media in the minutes and days after the takeover as well, weren't they? It just shows how wholly linked this team in the northeast of England is with this Middle Eastern kingdom. And there you are. Here it is in commercial form.
But there has certainly been a certain lack of brashness around Newcastle since the takeover. There's been no grand spending, no largesse in terms of contracts or the type of players that they're after, although they certainly are ambitious and probably would hope to do so in the future. Nothing like, say, Chelsea.
That is true. They have been much more modest than, for example, when these big takeovers happened of Manchester City. And they're still behind, for example, Aston Villa and Newcastle in terms of their wage bill. It's just about to take over Tottenham, perhaps. But Chelsea is a whole different kettle of fish, and the accounts very interesting this week.
Yes, of course, Chelsea are trying to comply, like every club is, with the profit and sustainability rules, which means growing your revenue. So Newcastle are restricted by those PSR rules in terms of not being able to spend as they wish. But Chelsea have perhaps found some certain manoeuvres to bring income onto the balance sheet to fund a lot of those deals that they've been doing, those very long deals for players.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most significant ones, and we probably talked about it a few months ago, but we now have some values put on them, is the sale of the women's team to the club's parent company. That sale, plus some other subsidiaries, don't know what they are, but brought in a profit of 198 million. Obviously completely changes the whole picture.
The women's team still only averages a few thousand at the stadium. We don't even know if the stadium itself, Kingsmeadow, that they play in, has been sold as part of this.
No, we don't know that, and some other financial details regarding that team. The revenue of Chelsea's women's team, if you look at the Deloitte report, is about £11 million as well for the year, which makes this sum astronomical. I read one report that said they were linking that price they paid with a valuation of a team in the United States, one we mentioned last week on the pod, Angel City.
Yes, go back to last week's pod. I spoke to the boss of that team. And in fact, straight after we did the interview, Infantino actually ended up at the Angel City match as well.
Well, he must have been asking, how did you get that incredible valuation of your football club? Because you've done a solid there for Todd Bowley and co.
$250 million, so just under £200 million.
But these are Chelsea's numbers, aren't they? These aren't necessarily going to be accepted by the Premier League.
That is absolutely correct. In fact, they have submitted the calculations, their valuation to the Premier League. They are still in the process of assessing it. If you look what happened with their very similar sale of their 2 hotels to a sister company, they put that in as a 76.5 million profit. That had to be restated following the Premier League process. We still don't know. We might find out in the next couple of days what that new valuation is. But it did allow them to pass PSR for the 2022-23 season. UEFA will not allow that. So basically, Chelsea are going to be 198 million plus 76 million. That's £274 million deficit for UEFA's calculations compared to the Premier League's.
And this wouldn't be allowed in the Premier League if all the clubs voted against it. There was a vote, and the status quo was maintained.
Exactly. So this wouldn't be an issue. This if the clubs had voted to outlaw such sales. We were talking about it among ourselves this week, and you get the sense that these teams, so obviously the league is run by self-interest of each club, thinking, God, if we find ourselves in this situation one day, we might need to do the same thing. And it just speaks to the governance of England's top league, the Premier League, most watched league in the world, all of these things, and how the rules are basically set by the clubs or the owners who are in possession at the time of drafting the rules. It just doesn't seem the right way of running a competition without external oversight. Yeah, here we go.
And we did get some news from the Premier League's accounts this week.
Yeah, we did. That shows that Richard Masters' salary is 1.9 million, which compared to some club chief executives is, I suppose, of a similar nature. I think the biggest salary in a club still remains Tottenham Hotspur's Daniel Levy. The latest accounts show he's around about £3.5 million a year.
That's the financial intrigue around the Premier League, but in Spain, it is so complicated, isn't it? With whether or not Barcelona are complying with the La Liga financial fair play rules, and it changes by the day with rulings and challenges to the rulings.
Changes by the day. You know how in the Premier League we've had this Man City saga, for example, dragging for years. It almost feels like Barcelona's battle with La Liga is been going on for so long. This latest issue is related to a couple of players, Dani Olmo and one of the academy starlets, and whether they can be registered. And this has been going on since, well, at least 6 months now, isn't it?
Yes, and it's about whether or not correct information was provided about the sale of VIP seating in the renovated Nou Camp Stadium.
Yeah, so this is €100 million euro sale. Barcelona, who seem to be selling off the family silver as fast as possible to register players, have actually put these VIP box sales in the accounts. La Liga is saying, hang on, you can't just say something. We can't see this thing. As a result, they said you can't register these players. But there had been a stay of execution, hadn't there? But Dani Olmo has been allowed to play since the January transfer window when he needed to be re-registered. And there is a separate judicial body that will adjudicate on this. So this was just La Liga coming out with a statement saying, we don't count this. But until that court decides, it seems Dani Olmo, and I think the player is called Pau, they get to carry on another fine mess in football governance.
Yeah, there was some question over whether Dani Olmo would be able to continue playing, which might have been harsh on him, given the fact he wasn't directly linked to the financial manoeuvres which led to them being able to register him.
Yeah, exactly. And they paid 55 million euros or something, and he could have gone on a free as well, and that would have been, a catastrophe for Barcelona.
But Spanish football looks tranquil compared to, let's start in Turkey, Jose Mourinho. Another combustible moment on the pitch as Fenerbahce manager.
Incredible scenes. I remember posting on social media when he moved to Turkey. I was thinking, this is just, Turkish football plus Jose Mourinho is just going to be explosive. And it has proven to be. Latest incident after the cup game between two city rivals, Istanbul, one of the biggest rivalries in the world, Fenerbahce and Galatasaray. Mourinho's Fenerbahce 2-1 to Galatasaray. And after the game, he somehow went to grab, I don't know why he did this, grab the nose of Okan Buruk, a great former midfielder, and Galatasaray manager, where he fell to the ground. Cue mayhem and pandemonium that seems to obviously follow Mourinho. We'll see what the repercussions of this are, but the clips were doing the rounds, fair to say.
How much of this is a sense of frustration, lagging behind Galatasaray second in the Turkish league. Galatasaray manager, I think, downplayed it, certainly not stoking those tensions. But across to Greece and the Olympiakos chairman, Evangelos Marinakis, he's going to stand trial.
Yeah, well, he faces a trial, and it's Marinakis is already quite a controversial figure. We don't need to get into all the rap sheet right now. You can look at that online. But yeah, this latest issue is pretty grisly. A policeman ended up being murdered by being hit with a flare. it says 140 Olympiacos supporters also faced the accusations. So it's quite a grisly incident, very, very ugly. And Marinakis, though, has responded. He's a billionaire, of course, shipping tycoon, and he's denied all the accusation. He said instead it's the Greek prime minister and supporters in the media of his that are attempted to blackmail and silence him by manipulating the judicial process. I'm not afraid. I'm not going to be blackmailed. I'm not negotiating. I'm not giving in, says Marinakis. Wow. It's quite a world away from running a football club, I guess.
Very punchy, saying he's not afraid, he will not be blackmailed, talking about it being part of a sort of scandalously favoured media cronies going against him. But it could have consequences, effectively, potentially jeopardising his own future as Nottingham Forest owner, given those owners and directors tests in the Premier League. So it probably has some time to run this, though. But
it does, and it's such a great moment for Nottingham Forest fans. They're in the semi-final of the FA Cup. They could be in the Champions League. And then you wake up to read headlines like this, because he's effectively, Marinakis has financed all of this.
Yeah, claims it's all fueled by political interest. Well, as we wrap up this week's episode, it's back to the listener we mentioned at the start, Tim Walters, who posed a question. He said he's a long-time listener, first-time emailer. Given that FIFA's hosting guidelines stipulate that World Cup hosts must either be Paris Agreement signatories or have an equivalent climate plan, and that will shortly no longer be true of the USA, do you think it's possible FIFA could be pressured to reallocate hosting rights for the 2026 tournament?
No. We've seen. They could face, and they have faced, accusations of ignoring their own rules. For example, when it came to awarding Saudi Arabia the World Cup in 2034, most recently. But they're not going to buckle, are they? FIFA won't withdraw hosting rights. Perhaps they should, but they won't, will they, Rob?
No, we just have to look at the picture in the article accompanying that email of Gianni Infantino and Donald Trump in the Oval Office with the Club World Cup there. And also, maybe you could say it would be political interference if they removed a World Cup from a country because they no longer signed up to a particular climate agreement.
Well, some people would say FIFA have made a rod for their back by taking that publicity moment, the good PR, by signing up to these things and putting these things in their statutes, which in the end they could be accused of not following through with, right? So the photo opportunity at the start of this versus questions like these at the end of them.
Yeah, and questions are very much welcome. As we've been getting more of in recent weeks, and we can try and answer them, you can email us, sportunlockpod@gmail.com, @sportunlocked on basically whichever social media platform you're on. There's also a WhatsApp group you can follow. The link is in the description.
Yeah, and any criticism, Rob and Martyn are both on social media.
You're largely just on Blue Sky now rather than the Elon Musk platform.
That's right.
As ever, thank you everyone for listening. Goodbye for now.